Just a first comment. You'll notice that in the program this talked about a PPR roundup, public place recycling. It's not that. It's litter. So I apologise for that. I'm not quite sure how that happened. Another piece of background about myself that is pertinent to this presentation is I spent the last 5 years in general, and the last 2 years in particular, working in brand development, which is very different to engineering, which is what I'm actually trained as. And that comes into the sort of the second half of this presentation, where I talk about campaigns nationally and how they work as brands, and if we imagine litter as a marketing campaign rather than an education campaign. So when I start talking about marketing speak, then it's not just an engineer making it up. It comes from a few years of experience in this space. So I'm going to refer to the National Litter Index, and again, a bit of a caveat here. Who knows how accurate the National Litter Index is in terms of whether Victoria is actually better than New South Wales or whatever, because it depends on the sites and all of these different factors. But let's just assume for a moment that it's actually representative. So when this chart, the bottom line, when it shows that Victoria is the best performing state in terms of items per 1,000 square metres, then it actually is. It's not an artefact of the data. And that Tasmania is the worst in terms of items per 1,000 square metres. It's almost immaterial where what's going on, other than everything is trending down, except for the Northern Territory. So what's happening in the Northern Territory? You know what, I wish I knew, but I don't. It's just one of these things that you just think, that's unusual. Then you think, well, what's happening in terms of the volume per 1,000 square metres? And here you see New South Wales and WA way up there, and again, Victoria really low, and you start to get this idea that there's maybe something going on. Maybe Victoria is actually doing something well, and maybe perhaps New South Wales and WA have a real problem with illegal dumping. So if you think about volume, bigger volume items such as illegal dumping will grossly inflate the data, whereas items will tend to pick up cigarette butts and the small things. So maybe it's illegal dumping. So let's strip the illegal dumping out. And sure, it brings down the numbers. It brings WA and New South Wales down, and they sort of come back down to the pack. So you think, well, what is driving that? What's driving illegal dumping? Maybe it's the landfill levy. New South Wales clearly has a high landfill levy, double any other state in Australia. Just take a bit of time to look at what this is doing. It's taking the states with landfill levy and looking at the litter rates in terms of volume per 1,000 square metres. That's what you'd call no correlation. It's not a factor. And that kind of makes sense. When you throw something out of the car window, you're not thinking, this is going to cost me $2.50 in landfill levy, or whatever it is. You're just throwing it out because you're throwing it out the window. So landfill levy is not a factor. So then you think, well, maybe it's got to do with the enforcement. Maybe it's to do with the amount of the fine versus litter count. So if you just look at litter count, this is little items, so cigarette butts, versus the fine for throwing a cigarette butt out the window. So that's what the fines are for the various jurisdictions recently. Again, no real correlation. Victoria does very, very well, but they're kind of an outlier, aren't they? You just see all the other states have varying fines and no real relation to what's happening in terms of litter count. So maybe it's how you actually enforce the fines, how easy it is to report litter. And there's not really any real correlation other than ACT. It's like you're not going to print a format and fill it in and then send it in to the people. That's just not going to happen. So clearly a website, at the very least, is going to be far more easy to use and ideally an app. Obviously in the Northern Territory they don't believe in this sort of thing for whatever reason, and you can understand that there's presumably other priorities for them. So kind of the conclusion from that is there is no conclusion you can draw. You can't create a correlation between infrastructure and policy settings and litter. So that's kind of a bit of a dead end. But it's one that you sort of need to sort of go down. Then we look at container deposit schemes. You say, well, we have heard all through this conference that container deposit schemes reduce the litter. And I believe that. And the data shows that. But what this chart is showing is very hard to read. I'm sorry. This is taken straight out of the National Index because I couldn't remanufacture these charts. It shows that when the Northern Territory, the red arrow is when there was a change in the container deposit scheme. So when the Northern Territory introduced their scheme, there was a drop the year after. When South Australia increased their deposit from 5 cents to 10 cents, there was no real change. So clearly container deposits have an impact on litter. South Australia's been doing it for 40 years. You'd probably say that a 5 cent change is probably not material for South Australian culture anymore. What about plastic bags? You know, we hear a lot about plastic bag bans are going to be God's gift to litter. And that's certainly proved to be the case in the ACT and Tassie, the bottom two charts. Not so much in South Australia, and most definitely not in the Northern Territory. So again, the red line is the year after these things took effect or came into effect. So Northern Territory, it's gone up, notwithstanding the plastic bag ban. And South Australia had a drop, and then it's just bounced back up. Again, not to say that we don't do plastic bag bans, but it's not the silver bullet. So then you think, well, where is the litter? And what is Victoria doing that's not happening elsewhere? What are the key contributors? So if you look at this chart, which is the count for each area, so I take it you can read the legend there. What you see is that essentially all of the states have similar litter in the beaches. Victoria has quite a bit lower litter in car parks, essentially in all transport modes, which gives you a kind of a clue how you can tackle this, is that people in their cars are kind of antisocial. You know, they're kind of cocooned in the vehicle, and they can kind of do things that they probably wouldn't do on their street at home. Similarly for industrial areas, it's not their home. They have no sense of belonging to that place, or belonging will do. And you know, a similar result for volume. Again, you just look at Victoria. It's essentially consistent for beaches. All the states are essentially consistent with Victoria, and similarly at the top of the chart for shopping centres. But in between, you see that there are some areas. If you're going to get really good results, you target, for instance, highways, and that's what we do. So that's all very interesting, and that's talking about policy settings. It's talking about enforcement. The bit that I think is really interesting for me as a erstwhile brand person are the campaigns. How are the various states campaigning around litter? And clearly there's, like I could be here all week talking about the different campaigns. I just want to focus on litter from cars, essentially, small litter from cars, so like butt litters campaigns. So ACT and Northern Territory, I couldn't find any campaigns there. That's not to say they don't do them. They weren't very easy to find if they exist. New South, as we know, Hey Tosser in New South Wales. Queensland has a campaign, Love Queensland, Let's Keep It Clean. South Australia, Dob in a Litterer. Tassie, Look Who's Littering on the Road. Victoria, Stop Litter Where It Starts, and WA, Litterers Will Be Fined. So you get a sense of the different campaigns. Now I'm just going to do something that's a little bit kind of flippant, and I hope I don't offend anyone, particularly not Rupert. Let's just substitute dandruff for litter. Hey dandruff head. Love Queensland, let's keep it... Well, you can't really do it there, can you? Doesn't work. Dob in a dandruff head. Look who's dandruffing on the road. Stop dandruff where it starts. Dandruffers will be fined. Don't be a dandruff head. What that is that's a really flippant exercise, but what it's trying to demonstrate is that when we label somebody as a tosser, we're kind of blocking them from taking action. If I say to you, buy Head and Shoulders dandruff head, you're not going to do it. You're not going to buy something that's for dandruff heads. But if I say to you, stop dandruff where it starts, you'll probably buy the dandruff shampoo. When we come to campaigns, when we come to brand development, we try not to label people as a thing. We try to tackle the behaviour rather than the person. And I hear that, and I believe that Hey Tosser is successful. I suspect that it could be more successful if it wasn't labelling people as a tosser. Because, you know, you're instantly going to put up those barricades. The people who are a problem here are going to say, mate, you call me a tosser, I'm just disengaging. And you know, I do get that the counter-argument is they're doing something wrong, so we should be labelling them. And my counter to that is, I suspect a lot of these people don't really care. They don't actually see it as something wrong. So labelling them as idiots or labelling them as tossers or labelling them as dandruff heads isn't going to get the behaviour change that you might get from this, which is a very similar message, but it's got that critical difference, which is tackling the behaviour. If you throw that out, you will become a tosser rather than you are a tosser. The other thing, and I'm just going to do one last little exercise which sort of goes to, my second point is, for Australians, saying dob in someone is a massive barrier. No one in Australia likes to be called a dobber. Reporter, sure. Dobber, not so much. So it's kind of clever, and you know, and the wordplay on help curb litter is nice, is clever, but it's kind of like advertising clever, and it just sort of misses the opportunity of engaging people where they can actually make a difference. Now, in terms of, I'm just going to take you on a little bit of a brand kind of a journey. What we do when we develop brands is we use archetypal psychology. We try and create a personality around the brand that people could connect with, and it becomes meaningful to people in their lives. So I'm not going to take you all the way through archetypal psychology. It's developed by Jung, and an archetype is something that you just recognise and you know it's universal character and it doesn't change time, space, culture, all these things. So if I say to you, you know, that character's the maverick, you all understand roughly what the maverick does. So if we go through the exercise of talking about what is the personality of each of these campaigns, then this one you would have to say it's something like a ruler or even a villain. It's quite unashamedly calling people out. This one here, the Queensland one, is kind of bland. Apologies to any Queenslanders in the state, and it's not a criticism, really. It's kind of the everyman. It's the guy who doesn't really want to get you offside. Maybe it's even like the nurturer, you know, it's just gentle and soft and lovely. South Australia is kind of like the defender, you know, it's like saying, defend the environment, dob in a litterer. Tasmania, it's kind of innocent, isn't it? Like, it's throwing a butterfly out the car. Victoria, I see this as a kind of a motivator. It's kind of motivating people to do something, take action themselves to address it. And look, I'm going to be upfront. I reckon this Victorian ad's really effective, this approach, where it says you can take action to stop litter where it starts. WA, again, this sort of falls back into that defender kind of approach, or the ruler, you know, it's kind of authoritarian. And then, again, going back to this Victorian approach is, again, kind of a motivating approach. And this campaign here, it started in 2007. I think I was in Melbourne at the time. That was when you couldn't smoke inside. 2007, you had to go outside to smoke. So the expectation around pubs and clubs was that litter would go berserk. So at the time, they had 58% littering around pubs and clubs. They were expecting it to go up to 80%. 80% because of the ban on smoking inside. They ran this campaign, littering actually went down to 33%. Because I believe it engaged people and it let them connect with a behaviour that was bad. Rather, you know, because smokers are so sick of being preached to. You know, they're forever being told that they're dirty and they're being punished by having to smoke out in the rain, and you know that they're going to die of throat cancer, and it's all over the cigarette packs. They don't need to be told that they're an idiot. They kind of get told it all the time. So if you could link it to a behaviour, then they can do something about that, do something with that. I'm getting close to the end here. I just want, like, maybe another thing that's having an effect is different states having different interventions. And I'll just look at New South Wales versus Victoria, not because of the great competition between the two states, but just because it's kind of top of the band, bottom of the band. And you know what? Very, very similar things going on. And that's all that really is showing. You know, different names, different sort of things, but essentially it's all the same. So that's a really quick kind of a gallop through what's going on. And you know, again, you could be here for days talking about the different approaches. But what could we do? What could we actually do to improve this? Container deposit schemes are clearly beneficial, and we've had countless people talk about the actual data that shows that. So that's kind of a no-brainer. Plastic bag bans, look, they clearly work sometimes, and I suspect it's how they're backed up and how they're reinforced and what else is going on at the same time as to the effect that they have on litter. Clearly penalties for littering are important, and it's almost not even the quantum of the penalty, it's the likelihood of getting caught. So we've heard a lot today about how you're trying to get community awareness to report in litterers and make it easy for people to do so. And we've been talking about this all week, all however long we've been here, stronger EPR. Let's try to get manufacturers responsible for their products. Infrastructure, as an engineer, you like to think, well, you just put more infrastructure in, more bins, more butt containers, get the bins in the right places, and it'll all be cool. Yes, and clearly no. People aren't going to stop on a highway and put their rubbish in the bin. If they're going to throw it out the window, they're going to throw it out the window. But clearly, infrastructure is important. In terms of campaigns, I've said it. Probably got the point about targeting the behaviour, not the person. It's a really big thing. Shaming doesn't work. It's very common in kind of government advertising, and there is clearly a point at which resetting community norms, which is what we're trying to do, drifts into shaming, and they are very close. But we don't. But once you get into shaming, once you get into people saying you're a piece of crap because you did that, and that's you, not your behaviour. That's you. Then they just shut down. It just doesn't work. Gritty, I guess in terms of the style, these gritty things seem to work. There's been we all remember when the first TAC ads came out, the big crash ones where you just see these horrific crashes happen, and they became all the rage, and these gritty style things are just in your face and really confronting. I suspect that we might need to change up on that. Maybe we need to rethink how we're doing our campaigns and actually go back and think about what is the personality that we're trying to express here. What do we want people to feel? How do we want them to engage with this? What do we want them to how are they connecting with it? Because if they're not connecting with it, then it's just yet another message on a billboard that they're seeing, but they're not engaging with. Clearly engaging with local groups, we've heard a lot about that as well. So I guess that's like a really quick zip through how we could do better. I think the tosser label is really good. I don't know about calling people a tosser. I think calling the behaviour of a tosser is strong. But there you go. I'm sure you'll hear this from your focus groups. The other thing also that I'll sort of say in closing is we found in our brand work that focus groups are actually not that effective because you need to decide what your personality is that you want. They're very good at getting recognition of what's going on and understanding and evaluating what's happening. But in terms of setting the messages in the first place, I think that's actually a creative and a design thing that you do up front. Do you want people to walk away motivated? Do you want them to walk away feeling like the government's taking care of it? Do you want them to walk away feeling that if I don't do this right, I'm going to go to jail? Like, in Singapore, if you do it wrong, you're going to be up for a lot of money. So that's really all I have to say. Thank you.